Since I first started racing, I've witnessed accidents involving close friends of mine. The deaths of Patrick Depailler in 1980 and Gilles Villeneuve in 82, and the terrible accident with Didier Pironi and the wet, three very close friends. They calmed me down a lot. After that, I had a philosophy, particularly on wet tracks or difficult ones, which was to let the others do what they want, but I was concentrating on staying alive. That never changed throughout my career. I won 51 races and 4 world titles, and although I lost some races because of that belief, I never caused myself any harm. My goal was to have as long a career as possible without any major accidents. And now, with what I do here, I'm making up for what I didn't do before, in a way. I'm having fun, a lot of fun, and I'm sliding around, which I never did before, but still taking no risks, and that is still very important for me.
The Trophée Andros is a French ice racing series that ends with a super final at the Stade de France in Paris this weekend. Now aged 48, Prost finds himself back contesting another title, and back with Oreca, the French team that he won the European Formula 3 Championship with in 1979. This is a world away from the glamour of Formula 1, but just racing again is a relief for the Frenchman after 2 years struggling to get over the bankruptcy of his own F1 team, Prost Grand Prix.
When you get back behind the wheel, you feel the passion that motivated you to drive in the first place, the sensation that drives all top drivers and sportsmen. That interest and motivation just came flooding back for me. And in reality, it's been good therapy for me to come back to something more enjoyable, because for the past 2 years, all I've done is deal with problems to do with my Formula 1 team's liquidation and have meetings with lawyers and public liquidators. Doing this has allowed me to rediscover my youth.
Exactly 2 years ago, a French court put Prost Grand Prix into liquidation. Prost set up the team in 1997, 4 years after retiring from F1. He went out on top as a driver with a triumphant parade down the Champs-Élysées after winning his 4th and final world title with Williams. Running a team seemed like the perfect move for him. Initial results for Prost Grand Prix were promising, but by the time his team had gone to the wall, Prost had learnt a few home truths about his sport. He believes France lacked the sponsors and the political will to give him and his team's employees a chance.
I often do think about it. What could I have done at this or that moment? What decision could I have taken differently? But unfortunately, and maybe this is a bit pretentious of me, I think that, as they say, the dice were loaded from the start. By which I mean that right from the beginning the situation was wrong. It just wasn't stable enough to create a Formula 1 team in France.
He made his Formula 1 debut with McLaren in 1980, before moving on to Renault, then returned to McLaren, winning the World Championship with them in 1985, 86 and 89. That third title came after a complete breakdown of relations with his teammate and enduring rival, Ayrton Senna. Their relationship, on and off the track, would define both their careers.
We had some difficult times. There was one period when we hardly said a word to each other. It was a bit of a strange relationship. I have my own opinion on him as a man, but since he has died, I've never spoken about it. I think that he was someone who lived his time in Formula 1 completely based around me. We were joined in a great rivalry, and he considered me as the one person he had to beat. And that's the nicest tribute and the greatest honor that I could ask for. When I retired in 1993, we talked a lot on the phone. We communicated a lot with each other, and he'd often say to me, "You've got to come back, because I'm not motivated at all to beat this guy, or that one, or that one."
Senna was driven to beat Prost right from the start of his Formula 1 career in 1984, when the Frenchman was already an established star. They were polar opposites, the calm, careful professor and the volatile Brazilian. Senna's early death has somehow elevated him above Prost in many fans' memories. But the fact is that the two were nearly inseparable on the track, claiming a world championship apiece while together with McLaren. In fact, Prost boasts a higher career winning percentage than Senna, despite racing for some weaker teams than the Brazilian. It's somehow inevitable that 10 years after Senna's fatal crash, Prost is still beating the risks involved in racing. His record 51 Grand Prix wins were overtaken by Michael Schumacher in 2001, and he's been overshadowed by the growing Senna legend. But while Ayrton seemed destined to die young, Alain just carries on. Prost's big rival in the Trophy Andros is Ivan Müller. He's no Senna, but Müller is the best driver in the history of ice racing, and the newcomer is pushing this seven-time champion hard in his own considered way.
It's true, he's a driver who was always very careful. Not necessarily the most dynamic or spectacular, but always effective. If you watch him driving on ice, you'll see he's probably the one who slides around the least of us. Yet he's still competitive. Ice racing may not be the sort of competition he's used to, but it's still auto racing, still about control, and still about track analysis, at which he's probably still the best driver in the business.
Prost shows his class here at Chevalier, leading from pole position. He wins both the day and night events, despite that damage to his car, to move up to second in the overall standings behind Müller. It seems that the man who hated slippery conditions in Formula One now handles driving on ice pretty well. But Prost has nothing left to prove as a driver. 4 F1 World Championships speak for themselves. And while ice racing may not be the biggest stage, for now it definitely beats the hassles of running a Formula One team.
The organisation of the big constructors' teams in Formula One is a bit different these days. There are less and less people who are very experimental, and so I would just say maybe to going back. Yes, it's something I miss, but it's not something I'd return to without making certain conditions, because I've rediscovered a taste for the quality of my life, and I still take a lot of pleasure from what I do, but with much less pressure on me than before, and less travelling as well. Formula One gave me a lot, but it's also a very tough life.